are you, buddy?
Getting there, mate.
We're missing the Lachlan Galvin interview. I recorded it.
Oh, is it on now, is it?
Yeah, with Danny Widler.
All right, boys, forget about
Oh, is that
NRL.
on now?
Anyway, forget about NRL. We're starting.
Yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to Football Fever in another jam-packed show. And boy, what a show we have for you tonight. We'll be catching up with Sports Director Michael Petrulio from the Melbourne City, who had a fantastic win, finally cracking that grand final against Melbourne Victory on Saturday night. We'll look at that game closely. We have our man, the best football agent in the country, Stealth Tony Rallis, and of course, the man that loves Newcastle, no one better than Andy O. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening, Chubbs. Evening, Tony.
Yeah, it's good evening. Nice to be with you.
Well, Tony, there's been a lot of things that we can talk about football locally. I mean, we've been in the news for the wrong reasons with grassroots football. We've been in the wrong news with, we'll speak about that soon, with what's happening with another betting scandal at Western United that's rocked us yesterday after the news. But let's start with the first positive news. The grand final, Melbourne City. It was their fifth attempt and made 6 grand finals, finally cracking it and winning it. It was, I suppose, wasn't the greatest grand final and it wasn't the greatest derby of all time, but from where Melbourne City came halfway through to the season with Illyrio Vidmar and to win the grand final, what an enormous achievement.
It was unique, wasn't it? I mean, they're famous for signing expensive players and spending big on the budget with marquees and designated and scholarships. A couple of years ago, they started to invest in young Australians, and the outcome of that was Jordan Boss and Connor Metcalf and Tom Glover and Marco Tilio. And our guest later today, Michael Petrillo, is at the forefront of that talent identification. Of course, there's a whole bunch of new kids. And I mean, this year, I think I counted at one stage, they had something like 11 senior players out. And they were playing with kids. And I'm talking 17, 18, 19-year-olds because, I mean, the word kids is overused these days and over subscribed. But they were playing with 17, 18. I mean, that striker, Caputo, Mehmeti, the list goes on and on and on. Young Wong he's a tremendous young player. He's going to be something special if he builds out. And they held the positions and covered the losses of Matthew Leckie, Jego, Andrew Nabu, and so many other strikers. Kohan, their Israeli striker. So kudos to them. I mean, to do what they did for about 8 to 10 weeks with the kids to keep them competitive. And then, geez, they're a brutal team, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, they panned out to the first of all, congratulations to Melbourne City. That's massive. I was amazed when they panned out to the crowd and you saw the injured brigade, as you mentioned, Tony, Andrew Nabu, James Jego, players that sort of walk up starters in any other team, but they managed to get it right in terms of their youth. I mean, like you mentioned, young Max Caputo leading the line, 19 years old. But that Jonathan Cohen that they've signed, and they don't know at this stage. I don't think they know where his future is. It was an interesting interview post game. I don't know whether you boys mentioned that, but they brought Vidmar in as they were interviewing Cohen, and he just really couldn't answer the question in terms of where his future lies. But what a player, what a signing! It just goes to show if you get it right, Tony, as you know better than anyone, if you get these signings right with a mix of youth and experience and players that can play on that big stage, you can really go places. And I think the youth these days in all across the leagues, and I'm sure we're going to get to the Champions League later on in the show, Chubbs, in terms of what PSG has done with their youth recruitment, as opposed to going for big names, but it just shows that it works and it is working across the world.
Tone, how would Melbourne Victory? How would Melbourne Victory look at it after Dillis? I mean, superb. I mean, thrown into the big hot seat. A lot of questions were thrown at him. Would he be capable? Is he good enough? Is he the strong personality or the big name coach that Melbourne Victory need? But how would you rate his season, making a grand final? I mean, he would feel hurt by now, but I think overall he should be happy with their achievement this season.
in my eyes, he's a winner, and he's passed the test, difficult test. You can't. Like, people wanted to blame Dilla when things are not going well, but if the team was winning, it wasn't him. So it's one of those things. Oh, it's a big club. It's this. Well, maybe it's not as big as it once was, and maybe they didn't. They don't have the aura that they once had. And there's been, since the departure of Kevin Muscat, it's been a little bit all over the place. For Arthur Dillis to step in the classy manner in which he has, and that is to, if you watch his interviews and you watch his conduct, it was all class and it was respectful. He didn't hide from the facts of when things didn't go well. And I've known Arthur Dillis now most of his life. He actually played for Sydney Olympic with the Nicky Carls and Andrew Durantes and one of our next guests, Franco Parisi. But he's sacrificed 15 years of coaching to get to this point, and I think he's earned the right. And I think, I'll tell you what, they lost 10 million last year, so they have to cut the budget. Dillis has got a real good eye for young talent. And in fact, there'd probably be an argument that he's better suited with progressing young talent and blending it into this group. And I wish him all the best. I think he admitted that they probably were a bit flat in the grand final, but I think they may have played 3 or 4 weeks of pressure. But he was class right to the end, and kudos to him.
He's done well, and I mean, I thought Daniel Ozani had a good game for them. I think probably the most dangerous play for him. But like you said, I think going to Auckland, those 2 games with Auckland would have taken a lot out of him, and always hard. And then backing it up with a derby was very hard. I mean, a lot of people question it wasn't the greatest game, but at the end of the day, I still enjoyed the game thoroughly. And I thought, at the end, Melbourne City thoroughly deserved winners, 100% thoroughly deserved winners.
Yeah. Sorry, Tony. I was just going to say that the opening 10 minutes, Melbourne Victory came out firing.
Yeah.
The goal came sort of against a run of play, and it was just a big momentum shift from there on. I think, but Melbourne Victory, to their credit, the first 10 or so minutes before the goal went in, they were the ones on the front foot, came out firing. Unfortunately, just couldn't really jag a goal, and then when Melbourne City went down the other end, managed to put one in that came off the crossbar, as we saw, and tucked away. And you just saw the momentum shift for the rest of the game.
I think it's been reflective of their year, to be honest with you, Andy. I think if you look at Melbourne Victory the last 12 weeks, they've probably been the best team for the first 10, 20, 30 minutes, even against teams like Auckland. But I think the difference being is Auckland and the other day Melbourne City, they've got a tremendous endurance and resilience. Like, they actually work really hard, even their top end players. And I also feel that sometimes players with tremendous ability, Machine, Valupale, Vergox, Piscopo, all these players, they're all tremendous players. And sometimes I feel like there's an expectation, the bloke next to me is going to pull it off or do it. And I also felt that they try to walk the ball in sometimes rather than take their chances on the first time, which surprises me. But look, I think they're going to be fine. I think Dillis doesn't have to tamper with that team too much. I firmly believe that he probably needs another centre back with Hamill out with ACL next year. I probably think it's time to replace guys like Traore. Their time have come, Bruno Fornaroli, and just those 3 positions possibly to be taken by youth that's on the verge of breaking through, that's going to create enthusiasm and lift some of those older players that are already in the system.
Boys,
I can tell you.
I'll go, Andy.
Sorry, Chubbs. I was just going to mention. Not sure if you're aware, but their under 21s are actually in the second tier of the Premier League down there in Victoria, and they're on the verge of. They're sitting top of the table at the moment to get promoted.
They're very strong.
To get promoted to NPL Victoria. Yeah, so. For a club that big, you'd expect them to be in the top tier of that second division or the NPL down there, but they're actually in League One down there in Victoria, our equivalent of League One, Chubbs.
Definitely, they're doing really well. What we'll do, because we've got 10 minutes before Michael Petrulio comes and joins us from Melbourne City, I want to touch with Stills. Firstly, we'll look at this betting scandal that rocked us yesterday, and then we'll update some transfer news because already we've had getting bombarded with chat messages coming through.
When are you going to that screen, son?
I mean,
Can't read
Bobby,
it.
this Brown B19, can we please, Tony, have some news on what's happening with the Western Sydney Wanderers? So there is a lot of chat coming through. We'll go through that in a minute, but let's start, Tony, firstly. Chubba TV understands that Rico Daninsky is the player who's been charged with 10 offences related to the betting corruption in 4 A-League matches in April and May this year, and police say he was deliberately receiving a red or yellow card during matches to manipulate the outcome of online betting. Now, we got rocked with MacArthur Football Club last year, and we were hoping same time, and now again with Western United. Is this now really becoming a huge problem in the A-League team?
Disappointing to start. Let's make that the opening statement. I come from a culture that's saturated with gambling options, and I did some digging during the week, and I believe that
just cutting out
players are easily accessible, and once they get him gambling, he was a frequent.
Just having a bit of problems there with
casinos and alike. That's alarm bells, isn't it? I can hear you.
No, we can hear you now. You're back.
That's right. Got you now.
Yeah, sorry guys. So basically, recapping what I just said, I think it's a generational problem. Australia in particular is saturated with gambling options. And welfare needs to, I know the PFA does courses and all the rest of it, but I think within the club, when you're hearing that most of your players are watching them on their phones and betting, I think we've got to revisit, educational courses and maybe even show them what the damage looks like. I think there's a lot of past players that would probably put their hands up to educate a lot of these young players and go and tell them the tragedies of tragic outcomes of gambling. I think everyone in Australian culture likes a bet, but some it becomes this addictive personality. And I'm shocked that this has happened again so soon after the MacArthur. I've seen the damage that it's done to MacArthur, the sponsorships, the lack of trust between players, and but it seems to be a cultural thing of our environment and our society today, and I'm not sure how you stop it. But what I do know is a player at Western United said to me, there's very few players that don't punt. And I'm not suggesting that they're part of any scheme or anything, but it's this cultural thing.
Tony, can I just ask you something in the position you're at, and you're in a very successful player management business, but how much involvement would a manager have, or would you know? I'm not expecting you to know the ins and outs every day of what these boys do, but is there something where a player manager sort of knows or is privy to that information to be able to guide him in the right way or get assistance elsewhere outside of what the club and the league are doing effectively?
I'm not worried about the players that tell me that they have the odd bet. I worry about the blokes that don't tell me.
Yeah.
And from a personal perspective, if I feel that a player is, if all of a sudden I'm getting news that a player's gambling, I basically have a discussion with them and tell them that I want no part in it if that's the road they're going to take, because ultimately it doesn't matter how talented you are or how gifted you are. Once you get into an addictive type of, and that's not limited to gambling, by the way, that could be drugs, that could be, alcohol, that could be anything. The moment you get into that addictive society, you're compromised. You're compromised, and compromise can be as little as not being focused on the game. Doesn't even mean that you're doing something wrong like this player did at Western United and the previous ones at Macarthur. It's also the fact that gambling affects your lifestyle. So then you're not focused in not being the best possible player you can be. And then you're vulnerable to characters that want to take advantage of you because you've worked so hard to make $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year, depending on the player, a week, sorry. And if you've put it in the pokies on a bet, you're looking to try and redeem that money back.
And we see gambling like the big gambling agencies, they don't care. They've put all these exotic bets, where you can place a bet on the next yellow card or a red card or how many corners or I can't even think. There's so many exotic bets, which does make it very vulnerable for these players because they're thinking, well, who's going to catch me if I give away a yellow card, really? Or who's going to give me away if I give away a silly corner? And it just becomes a little bit too easy, which somewhere I think the governing body, I always felt that these exotic bets shouldn't be there. They're not going to go away because they make too much money. There's too much people involved, too much revenue. But like you said, the only thing Tony's spot on, the only thing we can do that I believe is the education, and more education. That's the only way you can probably help people because the more they're educated, hopefully the more they understand. Otherwise, it's an ugly place to be in. And, we've all been there. We've all seen what happens. We know people. We've been around it, and it can destroy lives.
It's all that. And the governments, state and federal, are complicit to this because they talk about no gambling. They talk about this, but all they're interested in is the 30% or 40%,
Correct.
Whatever it is that they're getting, depending on whether it's pokies or whatever. I mean, the figures are, I know a lot of pub guys, 40% of their money goes to taxes to the government. So they don't want to stop it. It's no different to the cigarettes. Or they just keep hiking it up because an addictive character is going to keep coming back. And they don't need the volumes that they are. But look, in the last 5 years, the type of gambling that's out there and the ease in which someone can get on and it's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal.
Very concerning.
Tony, we're getting some comments here too. People asking why are people taking grassroots soccer so seriously with all the stuff that we've seen on the television lately? I mean, yeah, that's just a joke. I mean, people got to remember it's grassroots football. I don't understand how we get into all these brawls and what's been happening. It's not good for our game, and it's just we haven't seen it in the other under-18s, Olympic versus Wanderers the other day. Footage of what's been happening off the park as well with parents. I mean, parents get really involved these days, Tony, and they get involved, I think, even more bigger level than when I was playing. I mean, it's just incredible how much they get involved and how fanatically some of them get, and they forget it's just kids playing for fun. It's grassroots football.
No, we had a situation. You're talking about Western Sydney Wanderers and Sydney Olympic, and one would assume there's aspiring players.
Yeah, Uncliffe Banksia, we've seen it all over the news.
Yeah, and then Pika's a local community down the road from me, Gannon's Park, the other day, where 40 people are scuffling. It tells me the society is a bit frustrated and looking for yardsticks to let out there's some steam. I see it a little bit now with my little bloke out there playing that. Mate, I'm not sure if it's the kids playing or the parents on the sideline.
100%.
And it makes you wonder what they're all about, and they want to comment on coaches and they want to talk about. I mean, I'm watching some of these young referees. Who'd want to be a referee today with all those idiots on the side? And most of those idiots, Monday to Friday, are decent human beings, decent, hard-working people that,
contribute to society, yeah.
I had a situation the other day where we're talking about an under-8s where two fathers are talking. They go, we spent an hour and a half the other day analysing the tactics being used, and I'm sitting there going, and it plays in the warm-up, and that's fine to have an opinion, but surely spending an hour and a half analysing how your kids under-8s teams coach is coaching the team and analysing, Jesus Christ, mate. Get a hobby.
Wait till he gets older, mate. It just gets worse and worse, unfortunately. And I think these parents are the ones that get the white line fever. A lot of them, I find they're trying to relive their youth through the kids because they've had a failed, miserable football career or life in general, whatever. I think you're right, Tony. A lot of
it must be pretty boring.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's disgusting. To be fair, Chubbs, we've seen a lot of reports. It happens also in other codes, but it just doesn't get magnitude as much as it does with.
No, you've seen with
football.
The A-League Grand Final was heading the news about what was happening with the march and the so on pre-game. It's just incredible. But that's for another day. Stealth, can we have what's the latest A-League transfers? People asking Western Sydney Wanderers, they're asking Sydney FC. We've got Central Coast Mariners with our chat. What's some of the big updates you can give us at the moment?
I think you've broken a lot of those stuff. Sydney FC is obviously going youth, and the recent signing, I think a very good signing of Reece Shuley. I think he's a tremendous young player. I'm surprised he's come back from Belgium, and I think he'll add something. Whether he's ready to take a leadership role, I'm not sure. But Steven Ugarkovic from Melbourne City is believed to wanting to return back home to Sydney and probably highly likely to join Costa Barbarouses at Western Sydney Wanderers. In my view,
I broke Costa Barbarouses last week and got absolutely smashed. There's no way that Wanderers are interested in him, but that's 100% that Wanderers are keen on him, aren't they?
Well, you should get off social media, Chuck.
Well, it was the chat on here, so it was part of our show. So I was getting smashed that there's no way that he would be coming to Western Sydney Wanderers.
Yeah, look, it's out of Wanderers and Victory, and I believe you said that.
Yeah.
And I think the Wanderers are leading the race. I'd be honest, I'm surprised that Victory is interested, but Wanderers, I sort of get it because Antonson's not been re-signed, and I know that Milanovic, as we know, is going to Aberdeen, and there's question marks on whether Sapsford's going to be the next year. There's still talk that he may go overseas. Yeah. So I can understand Alen Stajic wanting to sign someone who's experienced, someone that still wants to play at his peak because he's got a World Cup to attend to. And that's important to Costa Barbarouses, and I think good luck to him if that's the case. Good luck to him. But as far as
here we go. Once the Wanderers fans are coming, why Ugarkovic? Why Costa Barbarouses? Here they're all coming in. Why?
They love the game of football. Just
everyone's got an opinion
together. Yeah, look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I think. We can only ask Alen Stajic on why he's targeting some of those players. Sometimes it's not just about the playing style or the structure on the field. It's also about characters off the field. I'd imagine that Stajic is looking at it. There's not too many guaranteed strikers available. Even if you bring one from overseas, is he going to fit in? Is he not? We all saw Saps and Milanovic outdo Antonson, who cost a fortune. So getting Barbarouses in, who's definitely wants to go to a World Cup and definitely has to put in, is important. Ugarkovic brings a wealth of experience, could play right back as well, but more importantly, will probably brings the winning culture of that Melbourne City environment that he's been part of for such a long time. Talking about Melbourne City, we're joined by the great sports director of Melbourne City, Michael Petrillo. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Michael. Can you hear us? All good?
Michael,
he's connecting now, Tony.
Have you muted us, Mike?
No, he's connecting. I think he can hear us now.
I can hear you now. Sorry.
Cheers to Melbourne City, mate, and a tremendous for you and me.
Hey, that red wine looks like a nice red from Barossa, maybe, Tony.
It probably is from your hometown down there in Adelaide.
Well, that's where the best ones are from.
Yeah, absolutely, one of the best.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you for making time to come. I know that you've got a team function and you've stepped out, so we won't take much of your time.
No
I
problem.
want to start by congratulating the achievement. You're
Thanks.
one
Thanks,
of the
Dave.
few blokes that I know that's been in the game longer than me, and you've done it across two great clubs in Adelaide United and Melbourne City. But we thought it was important to get someone like you on today because we get players, we get coaches, but there's a lot of other components behind clubs that work towards success. And while Melbourne City, in my view, haven't done it well with the membership and all that on the football field, on the football department, you need to take credit, and you're a large part of that. So you must be stoked after yesterday's result.
Yeah,
Saturday
thanks,
night's
Tony.
result.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tony. Yeah, look, it's the 8th grand final I've been a part of, and this one, I said before the grand final was going to mean more than any other for a whole range of reasons. Obviously, it's victory. We lost the last couple. Having known Vidi for a long, long time, and then the circumstances of the season, all the hurdles that we sort of had to jump over to get where we got to. And after the final whistle, it really, I was really emotional. It was a special moment. Just so happy for everybody that was involved, and players, and particularly Vidi. Probably no one more deserving in the game to deserve to win a grand final.
A lot of people don't know this. I do. You're almost like the big brother to Vidi in many ways, not just football, but on a personality. You're both from Adelaide. You both come from similar backgrounds. You're both football people. Were there times this year where you felt, is he going to be all right to deal with the 555,000 injuries to Leckies, Naboos, Jegos, and you suffered significant injuries. You went with a lot of youngsters. Was there any doubts that how is he going to cope with those absence? And
yeah, look, that's a good question, because the reality is I think there's a lot of coaches that probably wouldn't have, and I think that's the value of someone who has a calm head and has a lot of experience to be able to cope with the amount of injuries that we had. But also, I saw at the start of the season a lot of patience with the young players. He spent a lot of time with them, even one-on-one after training or during training, giving them advice, helping them out, giving them little tips on how they can improve their game. So, in hindsight, he was probably the best person to be able to cope. Because, as I said, a lot of coaches probably wouldn't have. They would have panicked, got upset, probably lose focus a little bit, which is easy to do, start to panic. And when you do all of that stuff, the players feed off your negative energy, and never once did he waver, and nor did anyone else, in the club. We just made sure we stayed confident, and ensured that the young players that came through didn't give themselves any excuse just because they were young that they didn't have to perform. The pressure was on them just as much as it was with the older players. So, you handled it brilliantly, to be honest.
You took a few. And you and I have discussed this plenty of times. You took a bit of a risk. You brought Vidi in, a lot of question marks at the time. You come from a top 4 resource club, and you have to balance playing style, success, and your mandate, playing youngsters.
Yep.
What is the sporting director's role, and where does it all start, even before the coach and the infrastructure? How does Michael Petrillo satisfy the requirements of the demanding City group who want to play good football, want to be successful, had his budget slashed, and he's got to do for kids?
Yeah, look, it probably, for me, in terms of coming to City, it was after 10 years at Adelaide, it was a no-brainer. I think the last few years at Adelaide particularly, I was really keen on implementing attractive style of football, whatever you want to call it. But I make no bones about the fact that I've been a lifelong Barcelona fan, and probably even more so, I was a Johan Cruyff fan from when I was a young kid. He was my idol growing up, and so obviously when he went to Barcelona, naturally for me, I became a Barcelona fanatic. And I suppose that's where the style of football really embedded in my brain. That's the type of football that I really liked. When I was coaching, I tried to do that myself. And then as a football director, I tried to implement it in Adelaide, and I think we were pretty successful at it. And then coming to Melbourne City, that's a type of football they wanted to play. So it was an easy sell from Brian Marwood to get me over to Melbourne. And, dealing with someone like that as well has been an absolute pleasure. So my job, probably going back to your question more directly, is, for me, I see it as being the gatekeeper of the way that the club wants to play, the way the club wants to behave, the values that the club wants to maintain, the culture that the club wants to adhere to. I'm the gatekeeper of all of that. And I'm going to make sure that the people we bring in, whether it's the coaching staff, medical staff, sports scientists, players, operational staff, we all have to buy into it. If you don't buy into it here, you don't last. And, in my experience, it's the only way you can have sustained success. I mean, we talk about a grand final win, Tony, but I think that, even a harder achievement is that we've played in 5 of the last 6 grand finals, and it's very hard to get to a grand final, let alone to get to 5 out of 6. And unless you have everyone pulling in the same direction, it doesn't happen. And I really make sure that everybody's on the same bus. If you're not going to the same destination, then you've got to hop off. And unfortunately, you've got to be hard with that. And that's one thing that I'm really strong on.
Melbourne City have built a reputation on strong recruitment, whether it's at the youth level or the senior level. You brought some exotic players, Gohan, Israeli, a couple of others, but you've supplemented it in the last few years on the back of the success of identifying and selling Tilio, Metcalf, Jordan Boss, Thomas Glover, amongst many others. Take us through the approach of whether it's identifying a young player with talent or identifying an overseas foreign signing. What are the quick processes that you go through to make sure that they fit what you're looking for?
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive process that we follow, and we stick to that. We are probably fortunate that we have a team of scouts around the world. So when we're looking for overseas recruits, we have our scouts that are based all over, as I said, all over the world. That we provide them with a really detailed brief of what we're looking for. And the characteristics of those players have got to suit the style of play that we want to play here at City. And they're very consistent through the CFG clubs in terms of the characteristics. Obviously, the level of the player is going to vary from one club to another because of the salaries that are on offer. But the characteristics remain the same. So we're trying to get the best players with the best characteristics that best fit that particular position to play our style of football. And as I said, we're lucky we have a team of scouts around the world, but we also have a full-time scout here in Melbourne. And he does also do some work with international players, but most of his work is done with Australian players, and even going down to junior NPL levels. So once we go through that process and we define the type of players we're looking for, they have to match the brief that's been given. And then, at the end of the day, probably the final call is mine. But there's a lot of consultation with the coach. And if a coach really doesn't want a player, then we won't sign him. But we've been lucky that most of the coaches that we've had are pretty well aligned with the way we want to play football, and it's been a pretty easy decision. It's been very rare that the coach hasn't agreed with the decision to sign a player.
To my next point, with the financial strain on A-League clubs, the central distribution going down by 75%, everyone gets affected, whether you're Melbourne City, Central Coast, Newcastle. I know, and again, we've discussed this, there's a mandate for you to not only to have a top 11, 12, 13 players, but to have the next Metcalf, Jordan Boss, Tilio sales.
Yep.
This year, you've done a great job. Lawrence, I could watch Lawrence Wong all day long, Mehmeti, Caputo. Tell us a bit about that identification process.
It's probably no different, really, in essence, to how we would recruit senior players. There's a high element of making a mistake with young players because some develop early, some develop later, some continue to develop, some stop developing. So, the risk of getting it wrong is much higher. But we not only use our scouts for that, but we use our team of coaches to scout. for younger players right throughout Melbourne and even interstate. But they follow the same sort of process in terms of the characteristics that we're looking for in those players. And then on top of that, and probably for me the most important thing is quality people, quality players, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 30 years old. We don't waver in terms of making sure that people are the right people. We you know, as I said, without that element, you can't have sustained success. And so we implement that from a very young age to make sure that the quality of the players, young players coming through in terms of their human qualities have got to be top notch. And if they're not, again, either we don't sign them or we weed them out.
Balancing immediate success and long-term development is tricky. Then, in addition to that, which other sports don't get or don't have a problem with, not only do you have to bring youngsters through and be successful, remain successful, but in our case, the World Game, we have to sell them to balance the books. Rugby league and other sports in Australia that don't have a world tonic to it don't have to do that. So it's not just identifying talent, it's bringing them through, but then having enough that you feel I can sell the next one.
Yeah.
Crystal ball 36 months from now, which one part of this group do you see going for $1 million plus?
Yeah, that's a look. It's I know a question that you're interested in. It's very hard for me to give that because then you start putting a lot of expectation on players. I mean, obviously the boys that have come through this year, the ones that are playing regularly, particularly, they've all got the capability of doing that. Whether it's Medin Mehmedi at 17, Lawrence Wong who's 17. Kavian Romani's just turned 18. They're all capable. Beachy's only 20. They're all capable of hitting those transfer marks. I've got no doubt about that. And then we've got another crop coming through in the future, and probably even as early next year that will probably play A-League football, senior A-League football at 15 or 16 years of age. I'm sure. So yeah, those boys particularly that I've just mentioned, I think there's no reason why they can't be multi-million-dollar players out of the A-League. And one of the things that I think we all got to be, I think, more consistent with, and a bit harder when we're negotiating, is not giving away players and devaluing players just because they come from Australia. That's one thing I'm really big on. Making sure that we hold our ground. If a player's worth what they're worth, then make the clubs pay it. And not devalue them just because they happen to come from Australia. Because I'm sure a lot of transfers that have happened over the last few years, if they were, maybe not so much in the last few years, but some of them, if they were players from Argentina or Italy or Spain or Greece or wherever, they probably would have gone for 3 or 4 times the value just because they're from those countries. So we've got to be a bit harder when we negotiate.
It's the stigma.
Geographically, we're limited in people can't come out and scout them every week. I know with Jan Jasbeck and others that they're in Norway, they watch them every second week because
I get that. But I mean, if they've been noticed, I mean, they must have been looking at them from afar, quite extensively. So again, and we're not talking about $20-30 million transfer fees, but let's get what they're worth, and because that helps everyone. It helps the clubs, it helps the players, it helps the agents, it helps football in general. The more we can maximise the transfer values of these players, the better off football's going to be for everybody, all the stakeholders.
Before I move on, my last question: how much of the current squad have you got signed up for next year?
I think we've got just about everyone. The only one we're Jonathan Cohen's on loan, but we're still talking about next year. Sorry, he's not on loan. He's signed a 1-year deal, but we're still talking. So we're not sure because he only signed 1 year because he wasn't sure what he wanted to do and wasn't sure about Australia. So I know he's loved his time here. So we'll see what happens there. And then the other one is Tills. We're still negotiating whether he stays another year or goes into Europe. We're hoping he stays another year. And then probably out of the other ones, Jimmy Jego, Steven Ugarkovic are coming out of contract. Stevie's a little bit difficult one. He might want to go back to Sydney because of family reasons, as much as we'd like to keep him. And Jegs, has had a tough time, obviously, with his injury. So I'm not sure whether Jegs will keep playing or call it a day yet. I'm not sure. We haven't had that discussion. But, it's been a tough time for Jimmy. But otherwise, everyone else is under contract.
Jakovic, Talbot, they're all off contract.
Oh, sorry, Callum. Callum's the other one that's out of contract. So, and Callum, we've had that conversation. He needs to play, and it's very hard when you got Nathaniel here and not playing. So, yeah, we'll I'll have to speak to his agent in the next few days.
Yeah, he's not his shithead, his agent. But do you replace those three in particular, Jego, Jakovic, and Talbot, internally, or do you look outside?
No, we won't. We will persevere with the young ones, mate. We probably might bring in one player, and we might replace Tilio or Cohen if they go, but the rest we'll use what we've got. I'm confident. Wongi will play more games. Romani will play more games. Mehmeti's a special player. He's going to play more games as well. And then, we've got a couple in the academy coming through that I think they will be part of the first team squad. So, and hopefully then, the guys like Peter Antonios and that are in the background that haven't had much opportunity will get some opportunities next year as well. There's no point having an academy if we're not used the players, Tony. And, the players coming through are top quality. And if you don't give them a chance, you're never going to find out. So I think we've done the work with them. We're confident in them. They've got a great coach, Diamante, who prepares them, not just tactically, technically, physically, but more importantly, mentally, to be ready for the rigors of A-League, because that's the biggest difference.
Michael, I just wanted to say you've done a fantastic role in sports director. And I wanted to say, when I look at my club, Liverpool, when Jurgen Klopp came in, one of the biggest things he told the club, he would not come in without the sports director. He was very big. He had to be a sports director. And Michael Edwards came in and he's done a terrific job, changed Liverpool for the better. And so the sports director role is huge overseas in Europe, and I think it's grown here in Australia. It's some coaches don't like it or some people don't like it, but I think a sports director has a vital role in the behind the scenes, especially here. And it's good to see you've done a fantastic job here in Australia.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I mean, obviously, I see the role as being really important, but there's always been that sort of sometimes a bit of reticence from the coaches here in Australia, 100%. Thinking that the sports director is going to tell them what to do. It's certainly not the case with me. I'm there to advise, to manage. Yes, there's some things that I've got to have the final say in, but you got to work hand in hand with the coaches. And if you have a good relationship with your coach, you can achieve great things.
Definitely. We've got to leave
Michael, just quickly, I just wanted to get Michael's opinion on a player now turned coach who had passion and energy, which you spoke about before. Scott Jamieson, seeing him on the sidelines, mate, I love it. I enjoy it. We're definitely looking at a future coach there, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. He's going to be a head coach one day. Hopefully, it's with us, but it could be anywhere. He's definitely got all the qualities, to be a head coach. He's got, he showed great leadership when he was a captain, and obviously I've known Scotty for a long time. I signed him from Bolton when I was at Adelaide United when he was an 18-year-old kid. And, in essence, his character, he hasn't changed a bit. He's it's still that energetic, bubbly, angry little ant, but, in a good way. But, and now he's matured and, he's got some fantastic qualities. And you're right. I think you've picked that one. He's going to be a top coach.
Michael, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and you coming out of a function today to give us your time. And again, congratulations to your club and Melbourne City. Well-deserved victors this season, and we'll follow you as well next year. And hopefully you do well in the Asian Championship as well now that you've qualified.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, boys, and keep up the good work. I was saying to Tony that it's important that these shows are up and about and people watching and listening, because we need the game to promote it as many ways as possible.
So being show is a loose lip statement, but we'll take the credit.
No, well done, fellas. Thank you for the invitation.
Good evening, Mike.
Cheers, mate.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Ciao.
Ciao.
So we're going to turn our attention now away from the A-League, and we're going to turn our attention to the New South Wales NPL. And we've got one of the most fantastic characters of the game, and I followed him all my time at NSL and a player, and now he's doing a wonderful job as head coach of RPA Leichhardt. Good evening, Franco Parisi. I don't think, Franco, I can see that you're on mute, mate. You probably can't hear us. I can see you're on mute. Yeah, he's got to fix it. Tane, while Franco's fixing that, Michael Petrulla has done a terrific job there at Melbourne City.
Yeah, look, he's been around for a long time, and sometimes he can cop some criticism, I think unfairly. He's a decent human being, but above all, he's a true football person. And they don't, Mike's been around, I would say, for 20, 22 years, maybe longer. But for me, a true gentleman, loves the game, cares about the game, and that's half his success, to be honest. He's very proud. You could see the emotion the other day with Aurelio Vidmar, and he's just very proud. He's Jamison. He made reference to that. He's got a long history with a lot of these people.
And I said the sporting director role in Australia, I think is underdone because, like I said, Jurgen Klopp changed to England the way they looked at a sporting director. He came in and they were saying, what sporting director? I don't work without a sporting director. And he changed the landscape in the Premier League. Now most clubs have a sporting director. And I think that's the biggest problem you face there with sporting directors is the pushback from coaches. And just like Michael said, it's not about them picking teams or picking their 11. It's about everyone working together, pulling the same way.
It's about the agenda. Someone being in control of the agenda of the club. Franco, you still got us on mute.
I think he's still trying to connect.
Still trying to connect.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you. But that's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can.
Okay, here we go.
Just press your camera on so we can see you as well, and we'll be running.
Yeah, but what's happening when I go to the camera? It goes to mute again. I'm a novice.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. That's okay as long as we can hear you. Now, firstly, congratulations. I said you've done a terrific job at RPA last year, winning the Waratah Cup as well. Bit unlucky in the semi-final series. RPA again, very strong, great result on the weekend against the Mariners. How are you finding life at Franco at RPA?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm loving life at RPA. So it's now third season. David DePuzzo and I, we've done it together. And I mean, the most exciting was always season one because I'd been playing for so long. I'd never really considered coaching or as soon as I did. And I transitioned from being the player to coach in a very quick period. And then the first season we won the competition in probably the only season that will ever run without a semi-final series. So if we rewind 2 years ago, 2023, the competition ran 30 weeks. Because it increased from 22 to 30, they thought let's be done with the semi-finals period. It makes the season too long. And so we really set out for that year to make sure that those 3 points, which are always valuable, but they were even more valuable. So then the next year we moved into another phase where the semi-finals were introduced, midweek games were introduced, and it was a whole different dynamic next year. So our third season in, and I think we adapt into all the things that New South Wales Premier League throws at you: midweek games, midweek cups, midweek catch-ups. Last year we had, in fact, 12 Wednesday night matches in a 30-week season. 12. So I think we've learnt how to coach very quickly, and I dare say having the squad that we have to play 12 midweek games is crazy. But outside of that, I'm loving life because you get to work with your players 3 nights a week, and then on the weekend you get to manage Australia Cup campaign, and this is our third campaign in a row that we've made the final 32 on a national basis. We've won a Waratah Cup, we've runner up in a Waratah Cup, and now this year we're in the semi-finals of the Waratah Cup. So 3 years in of coaching, and there's a lot happening. It's very exciting. I can't help but love it.
Still,
I want to take you back for our listeners, the younger ones in particular. You're a former player. Your CV reads great traditional NSL clubs like Sydney Olympic, Sydney United, and then you transition. You're one of the few that transition to the A-League with Newcastle Jets, New Zealand Knights, before you finished your career across 15 years and 300 games for Apia. It's a unique era, and our listeners would know that you played with Arthur Dillis, who is now the Melbourne Victory head coach and made the grand final. You played with Nicky Carl, who went overseas and is now sports director of multiple clubs and soon will be announced as sports director of another big club.
Of Club Marconi was announced today.
Was announced today?
Yeah.
You played with Andrew Durante, who's now doing a great job at Western United. What was in that era that made a lot of them transition into coaches?
Yeah, no, thank you, Tony. And I do much prefer when people talk about me than promote myself. So that helps. But I'll work backwards. There was, Andrew Durante and I, we very close mates. We share the same birthday. He's 1 year older. Arthur Dillis, I still remember. I was a 12-year-old going to the under-13s Olympic, and he was the guy. He was by far the best player, Arthur Dillis. You've got Nicky Carl. At 15, he was already playing national level. And when I caught up to him, because I'm a few years younger, he was already, a well-established young Socceroo, well-established NSL player. And what you found in these guys, in all these guys, is that competitiveness, but also the willingness to work with people. And when you keep it that simple, when you break it down to someone who's highly competitive, but isn't obsessed with themselves, right? That's the reality of it, because a lot of the best footballers, athletes, businessmen, they are highly competitive, they are highly professional, but they're kind of narcissistic, they're kind of self-obsessed, right? But in this group of people, we found the balance, and not suggesting you shouldn't be. Everyone's got their own way to success. But in the group of people you're talking about, and in the era that we all came through, we all looked out for each other. And I think that's something that is helping us work with people, work in scenarios where, it is still a money-crazed industry, an overpopulated industry on a global scale. And you're working with people that are happy just to move around. But all the people that we're talking about, we totally devoted to team dynamics. And team dynamics back in our time was everything. There was no scenario that didn't see that you would stand up for your teammate. And unfortunately, we're in a new dimension, we're a new generation of social media, of mobile phones. I mean, none of us have mobile phones when we're growing up. So we found the way to connect with people in a deep way without compromising how ultra competitive we all are.
I find it interesting that you say that, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. When I think of you four, and you're not always in each other's pockets, but when you get together, it's a dynamic, set of friendships. It's like you've never parted ways. In some ways, and I was blessed to see you guys coming through when I was at Olympic. You guys still are the best mates that came through, and it's shone through in how you guys coach or how you run clubs. I want to jump into something else that is really important for young generation. You walked away from the game at 27 because your family had a successful business, and you went and put yourself through a management course, a business management course at uni. You went back into the family business, started from forklift driving to cleaning the warehousing, and respecting your father and what he'd achieved, while at the same time, you played for 15 years, coaching 3 nights a week. I know you get up at 6:30 in the morning to start your day, and you seldomly get home before 8 p.m. And if you go out with lunatics like me, you don't get home till 11 o'clock. How do you do it, and have you sustained it over time? Because one of my biggest conversations I have with kids when they go, I just want to be a soccer player, I don't want to do anything else. Well, hold on a second. Here's a classic example of someone that does 60-hour weeks and always has a smile on his face.
Tony, you're too kind.
Oh, we lost him. You there, Franco?
He's trying to reconnect.
He's driving, I think, and it's highly likely he's coming back from work.
Yeah. So everything I've always done, I've wanted to do, and I've committed to it 100%. So it's easy to say, oh, that would be nice, and you give it a go and then you give up on it. But I think what you'll find in the group of people you've mentioned and myself, whatever I've committed to, I've not pulled back on. I've not given up on it. Sure, towards the end of my career, there were moments where it wasn't as enjoyable as when I was younger, but I never gave up on it because I knew I was there for my teammates. I knew I was there for the commitment I've done to the contract. So everything I've signed up for, you just follow through, and that's potentially something that we need to encourage the young people, that when you commit to something, you commit to it. You don't hold back, you don't withdraw, you don't give up. And in football, there can be lonely times, and the lonely times, there's nothing more lonely than being injured, being out of favour with the coach, being in between clubs. They're the loneliest moments in your football career, and I'm not sure that many people come through that. So that's where, if you have a mindset to commit to something through its tough times and through its great times, then on the other side of that will be success. Absolutely.
Okay, I want to move into some of your successes, not so much in the trophies and winning culture of the team, that's there and proven, but last year you were responsible for the development of a young man called Ben Gibson, who ultimately signed for Newcastle Jets, 4 goals, 5 assists, didn't have a pre-season, so one would assume that he's going to scale. I know you've got some really talented kids, Australian international Max Court, a former teammate of yours, Carlos Gonzalez, his son Oscar. Who are some of the other players in your first grade that you believe will scale and should possibly be in the A-League like a Ben Gibson?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give a quick mention to Ben Gibson. When he and I spoke, it was about 2 weeks after the NPL season, so let's call it August, September. And at the time, he was gutted. You know, Sydney FC, who had been for a long time with, they just released him. They didn't give any indication on what he should do in his career, and he was gutted. And so the conversation was, Ben, do you want to be back in the A-League? And he's a man of few words. He said yes. And then I attempted to get more out of him, but I didn't get much. And that conversation ended pretty soon. So then I rang him 3 weeks later. I said, Ben, this is the second time I'm calling you. I'm just going to leave it at this. If you value your football career, sign for a club that's going to get you back to the A-League. I said, so I don't want you to be an RPL legend, but I want to give you the opportunity to go play A-League again. And so why I'm telling this story, it's a quick version, is that Ben Gibson committed to 1 year back in the NPL to bounce into the A-League. He believed in his ability, and he gave us everything. And that's what happened. Yeah. And similarly, we've got players in our squad now. Joel Bertolicio, I think he's going to be the exact same story, where he'll have 1 season in the NPL and then back into A-League. And he's proven that he's a versatile player, that he can play exceptionally well in multiple positions. We've got one other young man, Jordan Segreto. Now, he was a bit unfortunate. This time last year, he broke his toe. And I think it was timely in a bad way, that it was the moment people were starting to recognise him. He started the season on fire, but early on in the season, the A-League teams are just worried about themselves. Respectfully, that's fine. But as it gets to this time of year, the A-League clubs are snooping around. They're watching our cup games. They're watching our season games. And I don't say ARPIA alone, NPL teams in general. And then he got injured in this period. So he probably missed out on being scouted, being watched. But I think Jordan Segreto would have been another one that jumped into NPL for 1 year and back out. We've got a whole host of other players. I think Oliver Kalatz is a goalkeeper that should be in the A-League, absolutely. Everyone knows Spider, Zelko Kalatz, absolutely. There's no one here listening to this show that wouldn't know who Zelko Kalatz is. Oliver's a different goalkeeper than Zelko. He's not as tall, but in terms of shot stopping and man in the area organising his defence, he's an A-League goalkeeper. It's simple as that. And I like these opportunities to be on a show where there's an informed and a specialised audience, because they know when you talk about football, it's very opinion based. And so I'm very mindful when I suggest players are of an A-League level. I don't say it without understanding the seriousness of what A-League offers and the difference from NPL to A-League. There's a big gap. There's a massive, massive gap. I'm not naive to that. I'm not ignorant. I'm not downplaying the A-League. I respect it in a higher way, and I know there's a significant step from NPL to A-League. But when I mention these players' names, some may need a few weeks physically to catch up to speed. Some may need a few weeks to have that nous around being a professional footballer. But in essence of the ability, the decision making. So I put a lot of this down to when players are in key moments, when they're under pressure, when they're in the real essence of a football match, they're making the right decisions over and over and over again correctly. And that, for me, is the measure of who can play at a higher level. Everyone might look at different things, but for me, it's that decision making and that smartness of effective decision making on a consistently high level basis. The speed, the technique, the mental toughness, they're all valid, highly valid, but I think that's a bit easier to achieve than when someone is making a decision in a moment when there's two players pressing them, there's one player running to the right, one to the left, and they're constantly finding the right exit, the right solution, the right execution, the ability to defensively be in the right place. There's other few players that are exceptionally good and should have a chance as well. We talk about Eddie Caspers. He was a long time through Bulls and came to us last year and was Player of the Year for Apia, not just from the coach's standpoint. All his peers voted Eddie Caspers as the best player for Apia last year. And although we didn't win the competition, I'm sure everyone would recognise that in our moments we were one of the best teams in the comp, without doubt. And so when Eddie Caspers is voted by his peers as the best player in that team, that lends itself. And I'm probably sure, and I'm sure my boys, if they're listening, will be upset. What about me? What about me? And I could rally off a few more, but I'll stop at that because I've been talking a little bit right now.
I suppose what I want to finish off on that point is that some players mature later than others. Some realise that they let their first chance go in the A-League, and stepping back is not a negative as long as you go in with a mindset. Andy.
Yeah, Frank, I'm glad you mentioned Joel Bertolicio. Yeah, he actually works behind the bar at one of my locals, mate. I'm out in Bosley Park. Not sure if you're aware. Joel works at the local pub, mate, pulling beers. Lovely kid, great kid. Comes from a footballing family, as you probably know. His sister plays at a very, very high level too, and is now back at Macarthur Ram. So, but you touched on before about the social media aspect, and I see with my daughter who's in the NPL system only at a young level. But I mean, how important is that management? I mean, you're dealing with it day in, day out, particularly with the males. The management of that social media, but it just seems to get entrenched in a lot of these players, and they become, some of them end up becoming lost to the game because of it.
Yeah, look, it's an ongoing formula that none of us really have our finger on it. How do you successfully control that, and how do you do it? It's ever evolving, I mean, we've got one of our players, Drayden Kelly. I think he's got 1.4 million followers on TikTok, right? And so he's actually up in Gold Coast right now doing some modelling. I'm thinking, okay, that's an extreme of social media that I've never even factored in before,
Yeah, wow.
And credit to him, it doesn't affect his football. He's back for training tomorrow night. He's always on the pitch, ready to go. He's always fit, looking strong. But so that's probably not exactly what you were asking me. But I'm just saying it's such a dynamic space, the social media, anything digital in our world. It's so dynamic that you really can't manage it. It's just about understanding your players and how they're affected by it, and understanding your players and how they're engaging into it. And then you have those one-on-one conversations. So it's probably a space that no one has mastered. But I think if your players are really respectful to themselves, to their club, to the sport, that's probably the only thing you can keep emphasizing to these younger players, is that, it is a medium to promote yourself respectfully, but it's also a medium to damage yourself. So be careful.
Franco Chubbs here, mate. Just moving forward, Tony Rossetti, the Lord Mayor of Apia and been in our game a long time, was a big driving force, I suppose, in wanting to have a B championship. Your club's going to be there at the end of the season. Now, how hard is it to look forward to the championship coming up at the end of the season as well, and trying to have a 30 league season plus a semi-final series, and then you've got the B League at the end of it as well.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant question. And to be honest, when the B League was announced, sort of not publicly, but when we as a club knew that we were part of it and what it was looking like, it was around the start of this season. And so we proactively communicated to the players that our focus has to be on this season and our focus has to be on doing well, because there's no guarantee of me as a coach, there's no guarantee of you as a playing group that you will succeed into the B League. Now, yes, it does follow one from the NPL, but without a successful NPL campaign, then we are unable to focus on the B League. So what does all that mean? It means that we have committed to our players that through the next couple of months, we will start identifying individuals that may need a physical break, may need a mental break. And that's at that time that we will prepare for the B League in terms of individuals. Because as a club, we off the field don't need to stop. We're relentless. We've got, as you mentioned, the Lord Mayor, Tony Rossetti. He's relentless. He's not going to stop. He's not going to lose any sleep. He's going to keep fighting. So off the field, we're able to stay at 100%, put down hard, going every single day preparing. But on the field, the players need to be physically, mentally, emotionally prepared. And so what we're doing is off the field just preparing on what does that look like. And what does that mean in terms of what I communicate at the start of the season is that get the season in a position that we can start managing our players. So we've had a few unfortunate injuries, but one guy in particular, Temba Motamalo, who I believe has been the best central defender in the NPL New South Wales space for the last 6 years comfortably, if not more. He and I had a one-on-one particularly about this, and so I'll lean on that. And Temba and I had an agreement that come August, he would have a couple of weeks where we say, mate, just get away from the game, go on a holiday, do whatever you need, because playing more than 9 months, rolling into a preseason that started in December, rolling into a second competition that starts in October with only a 2-week mandatory, it's not physically possible. It's not mentally possible. So that's our approach, and I'm happy to share that publicly, because player welfare is what I believe in the most. Player welfare has to be first and foremost. And any referee that knows me, I'm the nicest guy until my player safety has been compromised on the field. And then all of a sudden you hear my voice on the sideline, others don't hear me. And it's the same with player welfare. If we are pushing players through injuries or through long periods of match time or 12 midweek games in a season, which we had last year, I start getting really, really vocal around the well-being and safety of players.
I agree 100%. Just quickly as well, this season you were well placed. You're in that top 6 again, in that top 4. How Marconi again shining light so far, doing really well after winning the championship. They're flying, and Rockdale seems to be their closest rival with yourselves, Blacktown City and maybe Sydney United. But how confident are you, Franco, that you can close the gap on Marconi this season and maybe take it to the next level?
Hey, look, up until now, we're very proud of where we are. We're very alive in every competition available. So we're in the national stage, the final 32 of the Australia Cup. We're in the final 4 semi-final stage of Waratah Cup. And we're in the competition sitting where we're comfortable with. So we've been able to manage multiple competitions, a squad that we have, and we haven't peaked too early, similar to what we're talking about, that we know our competition or our season isn't ending until November, December. So where we sit now, just on the turn of the competition in the second round, there are, plenty of games left. So we've had 2 games into the second round. We've got 13 competition games to go. We've got Waratah Cup semi-final coming up Wednesday week. We've got an Australia Cup round of 32 coming up towards the end of July. We're very pleased. And to answer you specifically about the competition, we'll keep managing that with the cup games and with our squad being able to transition into a following season. So we expect to be there at the business end of the season come semi-finals. And where we're sitting now, the team has just performed exceptionally well to be very alive in every competition. Marconi and Rockdale, they're there, they're flying, and they've got total focus now on the season. They don't have any cup games to worry about, so they'll continue winning. So the competition will get very exciting, and as much as you try to chase the top guys, if they keep winning, it doesn't get easy. But we've got a lot to worry about, and player development is still top of my list. So if we can get 2 or 3 players pushing into A-League, or we get 2 or 3 players representing Australia in Max Court, there's another one of our players being followed by Football Australia for another level.
He nearly scored on his debut as well. I'm very unlucky.
Yeah.
He should have scored. It was very unlucky. Franco, brilliant, mate. Appreciate all your time. Stealth, anything before we go? Or
No, I think he's given us a great insight on how he thinks and how he progresses, and that's why he's so talented, not only in the football world, but in the corporate world, and we wish him all the best moving forward, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Franco.
Thanks, Franco.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you. I'll try to get the video next time.
Yeah.
Stealth, just before we let you go, you've done an extended period. We appreciate it tonight. Nick was meant to come on from the start. I don't know where he is again today. Thanks for staying on with us. Tone, I just wanted to say that he's right. Yourself, because you're a football agent and you work with a lot of players from the NPL going to the A-League. Do you think the gap has closed between the NPL and the A-League now? Have we closed the gap?
Not sure if we've closed the gap. I think there's an appreciation that if a player has the right mentality and the right physical skill set, that there is a place for them. People forget that a lot of players in certain positions mature later than, and by taking a step back, and it's not the end of the world. I mean, when I tell a player, take a step back, do this for me. Anthony Pentazopoulos is a classic example. Probably one of Western City Wanderers' best under 23 international, all in 1 year. He had to go back to Oakley Cannons for 3 years to learn his trade from 17 to 20. And it doesn't always have to be like that. Ben Gibson's another example. Joseph, how do you pronounce it?
Bertoluccio.
Bertoluccio. I've got another exclusive for you, Andy. Next time he serves you a beer, tell him Stealth Rallis will tell you whether to go to Newcastle or whether to go to Central Coast, because two clubs.
That young Max Court of RPL I really like a lot, and he made his debut on the weekend. I think he's going to be a big talent, that Max Court.
Oh, mate, he's a special player. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him and his father last week. He and I don't know if you remember, Chubb, there was another player in that era, Carlos Gonzalez. He actually signed from Sydney to Newcastle United. His young boy, Oscar. I haven't seen a finisher like it.
Yeah.
He's just injured at the moment. He's another 16-year-old. Look, there's a lot of talented players. It's about picking the right club to go to and the right opportunity. And we need more coaches like Robbie Stanton and Carl Veer that will listen to the Franco Parisis and the Chris Taylors and the Peter Tsakenis and the Nicky Carls of this world. People, today Marconi announced Nick Carl. Nick Carl's been at SD Raiders for 10 years, got promoted twice, could get promoted for the third year. Every year, Sydney FC rate 20 players from his club. He doesn't care. He reinvents them. 100%. He found Clayton Taylor. He found Oscar Fryer. He found Nicola Con, who's in the 17s and probably will be a star. So there's plenty of talent. It's how you nurture it.
Yeah, I don't think he's officially been unveiled, but there's a lot of talk about he's going there. Yeah.
Oh, geez, I'm going to get a call for being abused. Then I thought he was announced.
Did you blame Chubba for that?
Just blame me. I always cop it. Don't worry, Tom. Stealth, once again, thank you for your time. Brilliant as ever. We loved it. We missed you last week. Glad we had you back this week. And go enjoy another glass of wine and wind down, mate. I know you get 500 phone calls a day.
I hope the listeners that listened today got an insight of the sports director and a former player that's become a very successful coach. Different dynamics to what we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Fantastic.
All right, boys. Have a great
All right.
show. Any more absences from Nick? I think he needs to take his photo off the show. See you later.
See you later.
See you, mate.
Andy, before we finish with the NPL, can you quickly go through the results league table and then we'll switch over to the Champions League and a few EPL transfers?
Yeah, mate. Well, there was a midweek game, Chubbs, your beloved Sydney Olympic, a big 3-0 win against Central Coast Mariners, and then they backed it up on Saturday with a 1-1 draw with Western Sydney Wanderers. We had Northwest Spirit, a big win, 4-1 over Blacktown City. Sutherland Sharks went down 1-0 at home to Manly United. Apia, a big win. Franco's team 5-0 against Central Coast Mariners. St. George City and Wollongong drew 1-1. Rockdale defeated St. George Saints 3-1. And a big game yesterday, Chubbs. I actually had a mate reporting to me live from this game. Basically, last-minute winner, Sydney United 3 over Sydney FC 2. And we also had Marconi continue on their winning way with a 2-1 half-full win against Mount Druitt. And the standings at the moment, Chubbs, Marconi still 5 points clear of Rockdale. They're on 42, Rockdale 37. Spirit back up in third with their big win on 34. Apia 433, Blacktown 5th on 30, and Sydney United wrap up that 6th spot. They're on 27, 4 points clear of Manly, who've got a game in hand. They're on 23. St. George Saints 22, Wollongong 21, along with Sydney FC. Sydney Olympic 20, St. George City 19. Then there's a big gap to Western Sydney Wanderers on 13, Sutherland Sharks 12, Mount Druitt 9, and Central Coast Mariners still at the bottom of the table on 6 points.
It's heating up, like Franco said. Marconi and Rockdale really doing really well, and yeah, both got knocked out of the FFA Cup, so it does help that they're going to just be relying on the competition. I think Spirit, Sydney United, really moving in and up, yeah. So I think 13 games to go, things are really heating up in the NPL, and it's going to be another cracker.
Oh, for sure. And I think we spoke about it last week, maybe even the week before, about how we know it gets interesting when a lot of these players are coming back for these A-League clubs as well. There's a lot of movement happening there. But yeah, I mean some of the results, even for Mount Druitt yesterday to push Marconi league leaders all the way. A hard-fought win for Marconi, as I mentioned. But yeah, really looking forward to this second part of the season, Chubbs. And make sure you get out to a couple of games if you can. It's a fantastic atmosphere.
100%. And we're at the business. And all right, we'll turn our attention to actually we've got quickly as well. We've got the Matildas game tomorrow with Argentina. We mentioned that, and I think was there a new Matildas coach being announced today, Andy? I believe.
Yeah, yes, there was. His name escapes me at the moment. Joe something like that. Yeah. Australian. Been Olympically on for the last couple of seasons. He's come back into the Australian, come back to Australia to coach the Matildas. They had a big 2-0 win over Argentina. They're friendly on Thursday night, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're down in Canberra tonight. I've actually had a mate send me a photo who's at the game. So
they're tomorrow, aren't they?
No, tonight.
That is
tonight. Yeah, it's tonight. Yeah, and we've also got Chubbs of World Cup qualifiers. There's another massive 10 days ahead of qualifiers for the Socceroos. We know we come up against Japan in Perth.
Graham Arnold making his debut with
Iraq. Yeah, that's another big one. So yeah, there's a lot going on. As you know, the majority of the seasons overseas, the European seasons are finished. We had the Champions League.
Well, let's speak about. We had the two finals. We had the Confederations Cup where Chelsea won quite comfortably. What I will say about that, Chelsea did. They're now calling it the Grand Slam. They've won all the major European trophies, and they've added a Confederations Cup. A lot of people have questioned why Chelsea was there. Well, Chelsea, that tournament is not set up for a Premier League team. So the only reason Chelsea fell in that competition was because of Man U winning, surprisingly, the FA Cup last year against Man City. So it knocked Chelsea out of the Europa League into the Confederations Cup because Man United obviously took the Europa League spot. So really that competition's not designed for a team like Chelsea, but once they're there, you can't begrudge them. They won it.
Oh, 100%. They won it, Chubbs, and they won it. They won it quite easy in the end. I mean, to be fair, with even with a couple of games to play leading up to the final, they were the team in form. So managed to do what they did, and you said, sort of there by default, but they end up winning and taking home a trophy, and that's the most important thing.
And they're in the Champions League, as we know, next year, Chelsea, and they're gonna, with the young talent, they've been buying all young talent. They're gonna be a force in the next couple of seasons. 100%, Chelsea are looking good, and that trophy, even for a young team, winning a trophy like that, it can inspire success early on, and it can inspire them for next season. That's definitely.
Well, they had the I think I read somewhere they had the obviously the youngest average age of a squad in the Premier League, or may even be the starting 11 of 24 years old, which is unheard of. So they're definitely doing things right. And I mentioned the Champions League final. I mean, obviously a lot of us caught up on that, but even PSG, it's their first Champions League, and they've had players like Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe in their squad. They've spent over $2 billion or thereabouts in transfer fees. And
people were asking for Lewis. If you look at early on in the Champions League, PSG were questioned if they were going to make the top. Is it 18, 9, the top? How many they will go through? Correct. Them and Real Madrid were really struggling at one stage, and PSG were one of them. And people were questioning Luis Enrique. They were even were questioning his head. But mate, what a job he's done with some of the young talent there. Wow, he's done an incredible job. And let's be honest. When you look at it at the end of the day, Andy, if you're realistic, PSG beat Liverpool, even they beat Liverpool on the way. They beat Arsenal over 2 leagues and Aston Villa. If you go basically on form, you have to say they were hot favourites to beat Inter. They had the harder run.
And the other thing too is, Chubbs, and we speak about it, we banter about it in some of our private groups, but the French league is known as the Farmers League, and I think Luis Enrique made reference to it after they beat Arsenal, or it may even been the game before where they beat Liverpool. But what he's done, and this is where I was watching a lot of the post-game interviews and celebrations, is he came in and he basically flipped everything. He stripped everything back and said they're not going to go sign big-name players. They got 19-year-olds that are performing the way they are. They've still got a lot of big names there in Dembele, Marquinhos.
Hasn't he got the best out of it? Luis Enrique? A lot of coaches struggled to get the best out of Dembele, and now he's up for a Ballon d'Or. Who would have thought that Dembele would be up for a Ballon d'Or? And he's on fire. What a season!
100%. What a player! But yeah, no, they just stripped it all back, Chubbs. And like I said, if you're not winning a Champions League with the likes of arguably the 3 best players the world has produced in recent time, Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar. But you win it without players of that caliber. It just goes to show. And we spoke about it before, about youth, about development. Franco mentioned it. Michael Petrillo mentioned it. Once you get that recipe right with youth and with development, and it just goes a massive way.
Inter couldn't cope with PSG's movement, the speed they were playing in. They just could not cope with it.
About the third goal, the lead up to that third goal was
incredible. I mean, the second goal, a bit of a deflection, which probably broke Inter's heart. 2-0, it was hard, a bit of that deflection. But, mate, from the start, you could tell PSG were on a different level.
And you know what? They let Inter play, and you knew after half time Inter were going to come out firing. They had quite amount of decent possession in the first 10, 15 minutes of the second half. Just couldn't score, couldn't capitalise, and then that momentum shifted, that third goal. It was just amazing. Look, you feel for Inter, it's not ideal to be in the end of a scoreline like that. I've reached out to a mate of mine, Mark D'Alessandro. A lot of people know
him. As well, after the game, he couldn't really. He doesn't know about his future either. He couldn't really say, so it could be a sad ending there too.
Yeah, but like I said, you don't want to be on the end of a result of 5-0 in a final.
I know how they feel, mate. We lost twice to Real Madrid. It's not fun losing those Champions League finals.
Oh no, definitely. But I think it's more the result, Chubbs. You just don't expect it.
Away,
yeah, absolutely, mate. It was a big result. Congratulations to PSG. I don't know if you saw the celebrations back in Paris. Unfortunately,
mate, incredible scenes. It was like it brought me back to when France won the World Cup.
it was ballistic. But they've actually gone. Unfortunately, they've reported. I think 2 people have died on the back of
100%.
celebrations, which is not good. So
there were disgusting scenes between PSG and Inter fans as well before the game. But we know this. We know what happens in these big European games.
Of course. Yep. No, it's a different passion, Chubbs, as we always say.
Mate, in the Premier League, I suppose it's been, like you said, it's now the busy time where clubs are bringing in, trying to get, bring in new enforcements for the season. And my club, Liverpool, from Pongod signed up, good signing, TAA, as we know. Most expensive transfer now. 1 week of the window, £10 million Liverpool got out of him, and he's joining Real Madrid to play in this World Cup. Andy, what do you think of this World Cup? Is this going to take off, this World Cup that we're going to see now in a couple of weeks? We know the window's opened early now for 1 week, just for this World Cup. Are you getting the buzz that this is going to be a successful tournament, or it's just another tournament that's just going to... I think the money they're giving is going to make... Well, it's going to make all the top clubs, and the players turn up, because it's a huge windfall. But do you think this tournament is what we need, and will it take off?
Well, let's be honest, Chubbs. The lead-up's been pretty
not much.
Tame.
Yeah.
There hasn't been much at all. Yeah, pretty tame. So. Look, it's an interesting one. I'm a traditionalist, as you are, mate. We don't like to fix things if they're not broken.
I don't know if we needed a World Cup in club football.
Yeah, correct.
That's what it is.
That's all it is. It's a Club World Cup. That's exactly what it's called. But you know what, Chubbs? End of the day, you hit the nail on the head. It's financial. It's money. It's unfortunately, it's sort of what runs business, and one runs a business that runs a game. These days, and it's just another way of generating revenue for all the parties. How successful it's going to be, I don't know. But just touching back on transfers, there's a lot of rumours, and as you mentioned, Liverpool already done some amazing business. We spoke about it last week, but Chubbs, Arsenal are another one. I think they're trying to make inroads. They've looks like they want to learn from the past and how they haven't really filled the gaps where they had to, especially in their striking position. So Benjamin Sesko is a player that they've been linked with heavily.
Yeah, 100%.
The Alexander Isak rumours still won't go away, but they're trying to make a lot of inroads with the signing, and it's a really exciting time, this off season, when it comes to transfers, as you know, at this level and all across the world, in Europe, and even seeing where some of the Aussies may end up.
Yeah, 100%. No, it's a great time of the season, like you said. It's the very busy end, and the next, like, the transfer window's open 1 week, then it's going to close again because of this World Cup, and open after. So that's going to be a bit interesting to see how many, that's why Liverpool are on the front foot, and a lot of clubs are trying to get players done as quickly as they can for 1 week. Some clubs like Real Madrid, as we've seen with TAA, trying to get players in quickly for this World Cup. So it's a little bit new to us, and we're just going to see how it plays out, because once the World Club starts, you can't actually sign anyone. Obviously, there will be discussions, but of course, there'll be no medicals, there'll be no official transfers. So we're going to have a quiet period as well while the World Club Championship plays out as well.
Yeah, correct. And that's where it's going to be a bit interesting, because we're not really used to that, So, but yeah, I mean, end of the day, we sort of, we sit back, we wait and see how it plays out. As you said, just on that Australia, the Matildas and Argentina game, Chubbs, it's 2-1 at halftime, and the coach, whose name was escaping me, Joe Montemuro. Joe Montemuro. So he's also been at
so the
at
Matildas are up 2-1 at halftime. Yep.
2-1 halftime, and Joe Montemuro was announced as the new coach stepping forward. Took over from Tom Sermanni. I think Tom Sermanni, over 3 stints there, he coached 150 games for the Matildas, so a great career for himself. It'll be interesting to see whether Tom goes back to the A-League women's space at Wanderers. He was at the Western Sydney Wanderers there, so it'll be interesting to see what plays out there. But wishing Joe Montemuro all the success with the Matildas.
No, like you said, we've got the Socceroos coming up, some huge big games coming up, and it's it's going to be a busy period, although the leagues and the Champions League, everything's finished. Like I said, with the World Cup, the qualifiers, the Euro Nations League, we've got a lot still to look forward to. As we know, I think it's the semi-finals. Germany have gone in camp for that, for the Euro Nation League semi-finals as well. So plenty of football to come, Andy. Thank you, son, for being on the show again. Another great show, another great night. And like I said, we'll be back next week, bigger and better. And any news that breaks, you'll find it here on Chubba TV. We'll break it any way we can as soon as we find out.
I forgot to ask Tony, Chubbs. I know with the Max Burgess, Max situation. You know what's happening there with Max. Is there any latest?
Mate, just keep an eye out. I think there will be some. I've been told not to say anything yet, but we will break something in the next day.
Okay. No worries, son.
I purposely got told not to say anything, so I haven't brought it up, but we'll follow that closely. Thank you.
No worries, buddy.
You're just frozen. All right, Andy, thank you, and we'll catch you next week. That's all from Football Fever tonight. We'll stay tuned make sure you press that like and subscribe button. Make sure you follow us, and we'll see you on the back post on the next video. Thank you.
Please.